For 18 months, billionaire heiress Victoria Langford lay in a coma. Doctors gave up. Hope disappeared. Then a poor young man was forced to marry her, not for love, not for money, but because another man was too afraid to take his place. He entered her mansion carrying a false name, expecting nothing but trouble. Yet he became the only person who treated her with dignity. And on the very night he whispered, "Please don't give up," Victoria slowly opened her eyes. But when she discovered her husband wasn't the man she was supposed to marry, a shocking chain of secrets, betrayal, and unexpected love began. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. A pale Atlantic wind whispered through Charleston's harbor, brushing against the glass walls of Langford Mansion like a ghost that refused to leave. Inside, time did not move. Machines breathed in slow, measured rhythms. Curtains remained half-drawn, as though the house itself feared too much light might disturb something fragile, something already broken. Victoria Langford lay perfectly still. For 18 months, she had not opened her eyes. Once, she had been the future, sharp-minded, fiercely ambitious, a woman trained from childhood to command ships, contracts, and men twice her age. Now, she was a body surrounded by quiet desperation. Doctors came and went like tides, each one leaving behind the same hollow verdict. No change, no response, no hope. At the far end of the room stood Harold Langford, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture still carrying the authority of a man who had built an empire from salt water and steel. But his eyes betrayed him. They lingered on his granddaughter, not as a businessman evaluating risk, but as a grandfather bargaining with fate. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence. The doctor hesitated, then lowered his gaze. "We've done everything we can. Her body is stable, but her mind hasn't responded. The chances of recovery are now extremely low." The words did not echo. They sank. Harold closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself against a storm only he could see. When he opened them again, something older than logic stirred within him. "Bring me the file," he said. Minutes later, a worn leather folder rested in his hands. He had not opened it in years, perhaps because he did not believe in it, or perhaps because he feared what it might demand of him if it were true. Inside was a single page, a prophecy written by a dying preacher long before Victoria was born. "When the storm comes for her life, only a man born under the same sun on the same day will guide her back from the edge of death." Harold had dismissed it as superstition once. Now, with billions of dollars proving useless against the stillness of his granddaughter's breath, superstition felt less foolish. "Find him," Harold ordered, "the man born on that date." Across the city, in a house that had never known luxury, the name they found belonged to Brandon Cole. And Brandon Cole was furious. "You want me to marry a woman in a coma?" he snapped, pacing across the polished floor of his family's living room. "Do you have any idea what people will say?" His father said nothing. His mother, however, smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried more calculation than comfort. "This is not about people," she said softly. "This is about opportunity." "I'm not marrying a corpse," Brandon shot back. "I have a life. I have plans." "You have debts," she corrected, her tone sharpening, "and this marriage solves all of them." Brandon scoffed, but he did not deny it. Still, pride stood stubbornly in the way of reason. "No," he said firmly, "find someone else." For a moment, silence settled over the room. Then his mother leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering into something almost conspiratorial. "There may be another option." Brandon frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The date," she said. "It's not just you." He blinked. "What?" "There was another child born that same morning," she continued. "In this house." The realization came slowly, like a shadow stretching across his thoughts. "The maid's son," she said. "Ethan Mercer." Ethan stood in the narrow kitchen of the servants' quarters when they called him. His hands were still damp from washing dishes, his shirt faintly smelling of soap and long hours. Life had never given him space to dream beyond survival. When he entered the main house, he felt it immediately. That invisible line that separated people like him from people like them. "Sit," Mr. Cole said. Ethan remained standing. "What do you need, sir?" Mrs. Cole smiled, though her eyes held no warmth. "We've found you a marriage." Ethan blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. "A marriage?" "Yes," she said. "You will marry into the Langford family." For a moment, the words sounded like a strange joke, something too absurd to belong to reality. "Why me?" he asked slowly. "Because you were born on the same day as our son," she replied. The truth came quickly after, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that corners. The marriage was meant for Brandon. Brandon refused, and now they needed a replacement. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I can't pretend to be someone else." Mr. Cole's expression hardened instantly. "You can." "No," Ethan said quietly but firmly. "I won't enter another man's life with a lie." The room changed, not in sound, but in weight. Mrs. Cole's smile disappeared. "You've forgotten your place." Ethan swallowed, but did not look away. "My mother—" "Your mother," she interrupted, "lives under our roof." His breath caught. "You know her condition," Mr. Cole added coldly. "You know she can't handle stress." The words did not need to be finished. They were already understood. "If you refuse," Mrs. Cole continued, "she leaves this house today." Ethan felt something inside him twist, something raw and helpless. Images flashed through his mind, his mother's fragile hands, her quiet coughs late at night, the way she smiled anyway, as if life had never broken her. He had endured everything for her. He could endure one more thing, even if it meant losing himself. "I'll do it," he said. The wedding was quiet, too quiet for something that bound two lives together. No music, no celebration, just signatures, witnesses, and a silence that felt almost sacred, or perhaps cursed. That night, Ethan stood at the doorway of Victoria's room. He had seen wealth before, but never like this. Everything was perfect. Everything was still, and at the center of it all, she lay like a forgotten promise. He stepped inside slowly. "So, this is my wife," he murmured. The words felt strange in his mouth, unreal. He glanced at the bed, then at the empty space beside it. "No," he said softly, "not like this." Instead, he pulled a blanket over the sofa and lay down there. Because somewhere deep inside him, beneath fear and exhaustion, there remained something stubborn, something that refused to take what was not freely given. Days passed. Ethan spoke to her sometimes, not because he believed she could hear him, but because silence felt heavier than words. "You didn't choose this," he said one evening, sitting beside her bed with a book in his hands. "And neither did I." He paused. but I'll stay. Until you wake up, or until you send me away. He opened the book and began to read. His voice was low, steady, unpolished, but sincere. Outside, the ocean shifted. Inside, nothing did. Until a flicker. So small it could have been imagined. Ethan froze. His eyes lifted slowly. Victoria's fingers twitched. Then her eyes opened. Not fully, just enough. But enough to break 18 months of silence. Ethan's heart slammed against his chest. "Victoria?" he whispered. Her gaze moved, unfocused, fragile, but undeniably alive. And then, in a voice that sounded like it had traveled a very long distance, she asked, "Who are you?" Morning light spilled gently across Langford Point, as if the ocean itself had decided to breathe again after holding its silence for too long. Victoria Langford was awake, but the world she returned to did not feel like her own. Her body was weak, her limbs unfamiliar, as though they belonged to someone she used to be but could no longer fully claim. The ceiling above her looked the same, the room unchanged. Yet something inside her whispered that everything had shifted. And then there was him, the man standing beside her bed. Not Brandon, not the man her grandfather had chosen. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice steadier this time, though still fragile. Ethan swallowed. There were 1,000 ways to lie, 1,000 ways to soften the truth, but something about the way she looked at him, clear, sharp even through exhaustion, made dishonesty feel impossible. "My name is Ethan," he said quietly. Her brows tightened. "That's not what I asked." He nodded. "I know." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. "I'm your husband," he added. The word landed awkwardly in the air, like it didn't belong there. Victoria's eyes sharpened instantly. "No," she said. "My grandfather arranged for Brandon Cole," Ethan finished. Her breath caught. "So where is he?" she demanded. Ethan exhaled slowly. There was no avoiding it now. "He refused," he said, "and I took his place." The room seemed to tilt. Victoria stared at him, searching his face as if truth might crack through his expression. But all she found was something strangely disarming. Guilt. "I didn't have a choice," Ethan added quickly. "They threatened my mother. Stop!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough. Victoria turned her gaze away, staring at the window instead. The ocean shimmered beyond the glass, calm and indifferent to human complications. "So everything," she murmured, "everything about this marriage is a lie." Ethan said nothing, because there was nothing to defend. Harold Langford did not take the news quietly. "What do you mean he's not Brandon?" His voice thundered through the study, the force of it shaking the stillness that had once filled the mansion. Ethan stood before him, shoulders straight but hands clenched at his sides. "I deceived you," he said. "I won't deny that." Harold's gaze burned into him. "Did you come here to steal from me?" "No." "To harm my granddaughter?" "Never." The old man's jaw tightened. "Then why?" Ethan hesitated, then answered simply, "Because I was afraid." That answer lingered longer than any excuse. Harold turned away, pacing slowly. The anger was still there, but something else had begun to surface beneath it. Recognition. He had seen men lie before. Ethan did not lie like them. "Leave us," Harold said to the others in the room. When they were alone, he spoke again, this time quieter. "You could have taken advantage of her," he said. "No one would have known. Ethan shook his head immediately. That's not who I am. Harold studied him carefully. And yet, you stayed. Ethan glanced toward the door, toward the room where Victoria was recovering. She didn't choose this, he said. That doesn't mean I should treat her like she did. Something in Harold's expression softened, just slightly. You will remain, he said at last. For now. But peace did not last. Brandon Cole called that same evening. Ethan stepped outside, the salt air hitting his face as he answered. You're enjoying yourself, aren't you? Brandon's voice came through, sharp with resentment. I didn't call for this, Ethan replied calmly. Don't play innocent, Brandon scoffed. You're living in a mansion, sleeping next to a billionaire heiress. I sleep on the sofa. There was a pause, then a laugh. Even better. Makes you look like a saint. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want what's mine, Brandon said coldly. That company, that power, it was supposed to come through me. You gave it up. I gave up the girl, not the empire. Ethan's silence told him everything he needed to know. Listen carefully, Brandon continued. Find out what Langford Maritime is planning. Projects, deals, anything. Feed it to me. No. The answer came too quickly, too clean. Brandon's tone darkened instantly. Think about your mother before you answer again. Ethan's chest tightened. I am thinking about her, he said quietly. That's why I won't become someone she wouldn't recognize. The line went dead. Victoria watched him from a distance after that. Not openly, not kindly, but carefully. At first, it was suspicion that drove her, then curiosity. She noticed the way the staff spoke to him, not with fear, but with ease. The way he carried trays when no one asked him to. The way he paused to listen when the older groundskeeper complained about his back. No one acted that way for show when they thought no one was watching. And yet, he was still a liar. That truth sat heavily in her chest. Days later, Harold summoned Ethan to his office. The company needs structure, the old man said, sitting behind his desk. And I need someone I can trust. Ethan remained standing. I want you to take a position, Harold continued. Assistant to the executive board. It will give you access, training, everything you need. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. That's too much. Harold frowned. Too much? I don't know this world, Ethan admitted. If I start at the top, I'll fail, and I'll drag your company with me. Harold leaned back, studying him again. So what do you want? A job at the bottom, Ethan said. Let me learn from the ground up. For a moment, the old man said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. A man who knows his limits, he murmured. That's rare. That evening, Victoria entered his room without knocking. Ethan looked up, surprised. You refused my grandfather, she said. I asked for less. Most people would ask for more. I'm not most people. She crossed her arms, studying him again. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Before he could respond, her gaze shifted to the desk beside him. A notebook lay open, filled with sketches, detailed, precise, not the kind of drawings a servant's son should be making. Victoria stepped closer, picking it up before he could stop her. What is this? Nothing important, he said quickly. She ignored him. Her eyes moved across the pages. Dock structures, wave-resistant foundations, reinforced pylons, real designs, complex ones, professional ones. Her pulse quickened. You studied business, she said slowly. So why are you drawing like an engineer? Ethan hesitated. Just something I picked up. She looked at him then, not as a stranger, not as a liar, but as a question she could not answer. a storm quietly forming behind her calm expression. "Who are you, really?" she asked. Ethan didn't respond because, for the first time, he wasn't sure how much longer the truth could stay buried. Victoria closed the notebook slowly, her fingers lingering on the edges as if it held something far more dangerous than paper and ink. And in that moment, a thought settled deep within her mind. How could a man raised as a servant design something that could rebuild an empire? Morning sunlight stretched across the Savannah River, glinting off steel hulls and glass towers, as the National Maritime Technology Expo came alive with quiet ambition and polished pride. Victoria stepped out of the car first. The air was warmer here than Charleston, carrying the scent of salt and industry. It should have felt familiar. Instead, it felt like stepping onto a stage she wasn't ready for. Ethan followed a step behind. Not beside her. Never beside her. At least, not yet. "You don't have to walk like that," Victoria said without looking at him. "Like what?" "Like you're not supposed to be here." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I'm still deciding if I am." Victoria didn't respond, but something in her chest tightened, something she couldn't quite name. Inside, the expo hall buzzed with quiet authority. Executives, engineers, investors, people who built things that survived storms. Victoria had grown up among them. Their voices, their confidence, it was all second nature. But today, she was watching through different eyes, because of him. "Victoria Langford," a voice called warmly. She turned to see Mr. Daniel Reeves, chairman of the Coastal Port Association. "Good to see you standing again," he said, shaking her hand with genuine relief. "We were all worried." "I'm glad to be back," she replied. His gaze shifted to Ethan. "And this is—" Victoria hesitated, just for a second. Then she said it. "My husband." Ethan's eyes flickered, surprised. Reeves smiled politely, though curiosity lingered behind it. "Welcome." The illusion didn't last long. "Look who decided to show up." The voice cut through the air like broken glass. Brandon Cole. He approached with effortless confidence, dressed sharply, his arm loosely around a woman whose smile was just a little too practiced. Ethan recognized her immediately. Lily. Once she had been everything to him. Now she looked at him like he was something she had outgrown. "Well," Brandon continued, glancing between them, "this is interesting. I thought Langford's standards were higher." Victoria's expression hardened. Ethan said nothing. He had learned long ago that some battles only fed the wrong kind of fire. Lily tilted her head, her gaze soft but cutting. "Ethan, I barely recognized you. You clean up well." He nodded once. "You look the same." Her smile faltered for just a moment. Brandon chuckled. "Careful, Ethan. Places like this aren't meant for people like you. Wouldn't want you getting lost." Victoria stepped forward then, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly enough to shift the balance. "He's exactly where he's supposed to be," she said. The room didn't go silent, but it felt like it had. Brandon raised an eyebrow. "You're defending him?" "I'm correcting you," she replied calmly. For the first time, Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Not fear, not shame, something steadier. The tension lingered as they moved deeper into the exhibition. Booths displayed advanced docking systems, storm-resistant designs, innovations meant to outsmart nature itself. Ethan slowed near one of them. A large-scale model of a coastal port stood under glass. He leaned closer, too close. "You see something wrong?" a voice asked behind him. Ethan turned to find an older man watching him carefully. Mr. Reeves again. No, Ethan said, then paused. Just something missing. Reeves smiled faintly. Go on. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Victoria. She didn't stop him, so he spoke. The breakwater is too rigid, he said quietly. It'll hold for small storms, but in a surge, the pressure builds instead of dispersing. Reeves' expression shifted. You'd need a flexible support system here, Ethan continued, pointing lightly. Something that moves with the force, not against it. Silence followed. Then Reeves asked, Have you seen this design before? Ethan shook his head. Then how do you know? Ethan didn't answer, but Victoria did. Because he understands it, she said. Reeves studied him again, longer this time. Do you have any work I could look at? Ethan hesitated. Victoria didn't. She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook, the one he had tried to hide. Start with this, she said. Reeves flipped through the pages slowly, then faster, then slower again. Each page seemed to pull him deeper into something he hadn't expected. These designs, he murmured. They're not theoretical. They're refined. He looked up sharply. Who trained you? No one, Ethan said. That's impossible. Ethan gave a small, almost tired smile. It wasn't formal. Reeves closed the notebook carefully. I've seen work like this before, he said. Years ago. Coastal systems that could withstand Category 5 storms with minimal structural loss. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. Those designs were sold to multiple firms, Reeves continued. Anonymous creator disappeared overnight. Victoria's breath caught. Reeves looked at Ethan. That was you. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't deny it. Brandon laughed loudly from across the hall. Well, that explains it, he said, stepping closer again. He's not talented. He's a thief. The accusation landed hard. Eyes turned. Whispers followed. You think we wouldn't notice? Brandon continued. These designs, he copied them. That's what people like him do. Victoria felt her pulse rise, but Ethan remained still, calm. Do you have proof? Reeves asked sharply. Brandon smirked. Do you? Ethan reached into his jacket slowly, not with anger, with certainty. He pulled out a small flash drive. I don't argue, he said quietly. I document. Minutes later, the conference screen lit up. Dates, files, contracts, original drafts with timestamps years older than the designs Brandon referenced. Signed licensing agreements. Payment records. All in Ethan's name. The room shifted, not dramatically, but undeniably. Brandon's confidence cracked first. This could be forged. It isn't, Reeves said firmly. Security stepped forward. Mr. Cole, Reeves added, his voice now carrying weight, you are no longer welcome at this event or any association under our board. Brandon's face flushed with disbelief. You're choosing him over me? No, Reeves replied calmly. I'm choosing truth. Outside, the noise of the expo faded into the distance. Victoria stood beside Ethan, the wind lifting strands of her hair. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, you could have told me. Ethan looked out at the water. Would it have changed anything? She hesitated, then quietly, yes. He nodded once. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, he said. I just needed to survive. Victoria studied him differently now, not as a stranger, not as a liar, but as something far more complicated and far more rare. For the first time, admiration replaced doubt. Not loudly, but deeply. That night, back at Langford Point, the ocean seemed calmer. Or maybe it was just them. Victoria stood in the doorway of his room. Ethan looked up. She didn't sit, didn't soften, but her voice carried something new. "If you're capable of all that," she said slowly, "why would you choose to live like a nobody?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, because some truths weren't about skill. They were about sacrifice. And not all sacrifices wanted to be seen. Victoria took a step closer, her eyes steady on his. "If you're that talented," she continued, quieter now, "why did you disappear?" The question lingered between them. And for the first time since she woke up, she wasn't asking out of suspicion. She was asking because she wanted to understand him. Because somewhere along the way, he had stopped being just a mistake and started becoming something she couldn't ignore. The harbor lights flickered against the black water of Charleston, their reflections trembling like something fragile, like a promise about to break. Brandon Cole had lost everything. The contracts were gone, the partnerships dissolved overnight, and the silence from former allies was louder than any insult he had ever heard. Inside his father's office, the air was thick with anger and fear. "You've destroyed us," his father said, voice low but deadly. Brandon stood still, jaw clenched. "I didn't destroy anything. That fraud did." "Fraud?" his father snapped. "That man proved every document in front of the entire industry. You humiliated us." Brandon's fists tightened. No, he hadn't lost. He had been robbed. "That life," Brandon said slowly, his voice trembling with something darker than anger, "was supposed to be mine." His father didn't answer, because deep down they both knew Brandon had thrown it away. Across the city, Ethan stood on the balcony of Langford Point, staring out at the ocean. The wind felt colder tonight. Or maybe it was just him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something, some instinct he couldn't explain, made him answer. "Hello?" A voice came through, familiar, terrified. "Ethan, it's me." His blood ran cold. "Mom?" Her breathing was uneven. "Don't panic. I'm okay." But the way she said it told him she wasn't. "Where are you?" he demanded. Before she could answer, another voice cut in. Slow, satisfied. "You should have listened to me." "Brandon." Ethan's grip tightened. "If you hurt her—" "I already did," Brandon said casually. "Nothing serious. Yet." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "What do you want?" "You know what I want," Brandon replied. "Come to Pier 17. Alone." The line went dead. Victoria knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. Not fear. Not exactly. Something worse. Resolve. "Ethan," she said, stepping closer. "What happened?" He shook his head. "Stay here." "Don't do that," she snapped. "Don't shut me out." He hesitated, then said it. "He has my mother." The words hit her like a wave. "Brandon?" she asked. Ethan nodded once. "I have to go." "No," she said immediately. "You're not going alone." "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice," she shot back. Their eyes locked. For a second, neither moved. Then Ethan said quietly, "If anything happens to you—" "It won't," she interrupted, "because I'm not letting you face this alone." Pier 17 had been abandoned for years. Rust clung to every surface. Containers stacked like forgotten memories. And somewhere inside that darkness, Brandon waited. Ethan stepped forward slowly, hands visible. "I'm here." A shadow moved. Then Brandon emerged, dragging Ethan's mother beside him. She looked pale, fragile, but alive. "Let her go," Ethan said. Brandon smiled faintly. "You always go straight to the emotional part. That's your weakness." Ethan didn't respond. "Here's how this works," Brandon continued. "You walk away from Victoria, publicly, completely." "And the company?" Ethan asked. "You sign over everything connected to her inheritance," Brandon said. "I'll take it from there." Ethan stared at him. "You think she'll ever choose you after this?" Brandon's smile faded. "She doesn't have to choose. She just has to be available." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No." The word echoed louder than expected. Brandon's expression darkened instantly. "You're not in a position to say no." "Maybe not," Ethan said quietly, "but I'm not giving her to you." The first punch came fast, brutal. Ethan staggered but didn't fall. Brandon hit him again and again. "You think you're better than me?" Brandon hissed. "You're nothing." Ethan wiped the blood from his lip, still standing. "I'm not better than you," he said. "I just chose not to become you." That was enough. Brandon pulled the knife. "Stop!" The voice cut through everything. "Victoria." She stepped into the light, breath uneven but eyes fierce. Ethan's heart dropped. "You weren't supposed to be here." "And leave you?" she said. "Not happening." Brandon laughed, shaking his head. "You just made this easier." He lunged. Ethan moved, but not fast enough. Victoria stepped in front of him. The blade struck, a sharp, sickening sound. Time stopped. For one unbearable second, no one moved. Then Victoria collapsed. "No!" Ethan caught her before she hit the ground. Blood spread quickly across her dress, warm and impossible. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Victoria, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered. She tried to speak. Couldn't. Sirens cut through the distance, then shouting, security, police. Brandon tried to run, but hands grabbed him, forced him down. He screamed. It didn't matter anymore. The hospital lights were too bright, too clean, too indifferent. Ethan sat outside the operating room, his hands still stained with her blood. Harold stood nearby, silent, waiting. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had lost its meaning. Ethan stared at the floor. "I should have stopped him," he said quietly. Harold didn't respond. "I should have listened," Ethan continued. "I should have protected her." "You didn't do this," Harold said at last. Ethan shook his head. "She stepped in front of me." Silence again. Then, "I can't lose her," Ethan whispered. The words came from somewhere deeper than thought, deeper than fear. Harold looked at him, really looked this time, and saw something undeniable. Ethan's voice broke as he finally said it. Not carefully, not guarded, but honestly. "I love her." The words hung in the sterile air, raw, unfiltered, and for the first time, there was no lie left between them, only truth, and the terrifying question of whether it had come too late. Golden light drifted across Charleston Harbor, soft and forgiving, as if the ocean itself had decided to remember only the good that survived the storm. 1 year had passed, and everything had changed. Victoria Langford stood at the edge of the balcony, her fingers resting lightly against the railing. The wind no longer felt cold against her skin. It felt alive. She was alive, fully, completely. The scar just below her ribs remained, a quiet reminder of the night everything almost ended. But it no longer carried fear. It carried meaning. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. She already knew who it was. "You're thinking too much again," Ethan said gently. Victoria smiled faintly. "I spent 18 months not thinking at all. I think I've earned it." He stepped beside her, not behind her this time. That had changed, too. They stood in silence for a moment, watching ships move slowly across the water. "I still remember the first thing you said to me," Ethan added. Victoria glanced at him. "That I didn't know who you were?" He nodded. "Yeah." "And now?" she asked softly. Ethan met her gaze. "Now, I do." The wedding was nothing like the first one. There were no secrets, no substitutions, no silence heavy with uncertainty. This time, it was real. The Langford estate was filled with laughter, music, and the kind of warmth that only came when people were no longer pretending. Victoria walked down the aisle with steady steps, her eyes never leaving Ethan. He stood waiting, not as a replacement, not as a mistake, but as the man she had chosen. Harold watched from the front row, his expression unreadable at first. But when Victoria reached Ethan, something in his eyes softened. The ceremony was simple, honest. When it came time for vows, Victoria didn't hesitate. "Our beginning was built on a lie," she said, her voice clear. "But you never treated me like I was part of that lie." Ethan swallowed, emotion tightening his chest. "You respected me when I couldn't speak," she continued. "You protected me when I didn't even know I needed protecting." She stepped closer. "I choose you now. Not because of fate, not because of circumstance, but because I know exactly who you are." Ethan took a breath, steadying himself. "I entered your life as someone I wasn't," he said quietly. "But you gave me the chance to become someone better." He looked at her, no hesitation left. "I choose you too, fully, honestly, and for the rest of my life." When they kissed, it wasn't dramatic, it was certain. Months later, Langford Maritime gathered for its most important meeting in decades. The boardroom was filled with executives, shareholders, and voices that once defined the company's direction. Now, they waited. Victoria stood at the head of the table, strong, composed, unquestionably in control. Harold sat beside her, not leading anymore, watching, proud. "As of today," Harold announced, his voice carrying the weight of final decisions, "Victoria Langford will take full control as CEO of Langford Maritime." There was no resistance, no doubt, because she had already proven she belonged there. Victoria nodded once. Then she spoke. Not about profit, not about expansion, but about something else. "Strength isn't just about what we build," she said. "It's about who we protect." Her gaze moved briefly to Ethan, who stood quietly near the back. "And this company," she continued, "will reflect that from this day forward." Ethan didn't stay. Not in the way people expected. When Harold offered him a permanent executive position, even hinted at succession, Ethan shook his head. "I'm grateful," he said, "but I need to build something of my own." Harold studied him carefully. "You're walking away from power." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm choosing purpose." So he started small, a company no one had heard of. At first, designing coastal infrastructure, not for billion-dollar corporations but for the people who needed it most. Fishing villages, small harbors, places where storms didn't just damage property, they destroyed lives. Victoria didn't stop him, she supported him. And when Langford Maritime partnered with his company, it wasn't as a superior, it was as an equal. Ethan's mother moved into a small house near the water, nothing extravagant, but peaceful. For the first time in years, She didn't wake up worried about tomorrow. She would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the tide roll in, her son beside her. "You've changed," she told him once. Ethan shook his head. "No, Mama. I just stopped hiding." She smiled. "That's the same thing." Brandon Cole didn't recover. Not his reputation, not his freedom. The charges were severe: kidnapping, attempted murder, financial fraud. The evidence was undeniable. When the sentence came, it was final. His father's company collapsed under the weight of lawsuits and debt. For the first time, Brandon faced something he could not manipulate: consequences. A year after the attack, Victoria stood before a room filled with shareholders once again. But this time, her words were different. "People often ask what saved this company," she said. Her voice carried quietly, but it reached everyone. "They expect me to say strategy, or timing, or leadership." She paused, then smiled. "The truth is, it was a man everyone underestimated." Her eyes found Ethan. "The greatest asset in my life is not this company," she continued. "It's the person who reminded me what it means to be human." The room fell silent, not out of obligation, but out of respect. That night the harbor was calm. Victoria found Ethan near the water, as she often did. "You disappeared again," she said. "I didn't go far." "You never do." She stepped closer, her hand slipping into his. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria took a breath. "There's something I need to tell you." Ethan frowned slightly. "That sounds serious." "It is," she smiled softly. "I'm pregnant." For a second he didn't move, didn't speak. Then his breath caught. "Are you serious?" Victoria laughed quietly. "I wouldn't joke about that." Ethan pulled her into an embrace, holding her tighter than he ever had before. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper: gratitude. Later that evening, they sat with Harold on the terrace. The old man listened quietly as Victoria shared the news. For once, he said nothing immediately. He just looked at them, at the life they had built, at the future they carried. Then slowly he stood. His hands trembled slightly as he placed one on Ethan's shoulder, the other on Victoria's. "This family," he said, his voice softer than they had ever heard it, "is finally whole again." He pulled them both into an embrace, and for the first time in a long time, there was no past to regret, no future to fear, only the quiet, steady truth that love, real love, had chosen the right man. Sometimes God doesn't perform miracles by changing our circumstances overnight. Sometimes He performs miracles by placing the right people in our lives at exactly the right moment. Victoria believed her life was over. Ethan believed his life would never matter. Yet God used one unexpected meeting, one act of kindness, and one courageous heart to change both of their destinies forever. Maybe you're going through a difficult season today. Maybe you're carrying pain that no one else can see. Please don't give up. God often works quietly, behind the scenes, preparing blessings we cannot yet understand. Every setback can become the beginning of a greater purpose if we continue walking forward with faith, hope, and love. As for me, life hasn't always been easy either. I'm raising 2 wonderful children on my own, and there are days when the road feels long and exhausting. But every morning, I choose gratitude over fear, hope over despair, and faith over doubt. I truly believe that as long as God gives us another sunrise, He is giving us another chance to keep moving forward. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, and subscribe to support this channel. Your support helps me continue creating stories that remind us kindness, forgiveness, and love still exist in this world. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what lesson you took away from this story. I read as many of your comments as I can, and they truly encourage me. May God bless you, protect your family, fill your home with peace, strengthen you in every challenge, and guide your steps wherever life leads you. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding the right path. It's discovering that God has been walking beside you all along.